समझ नहीं आ रहा अपने सैलरी इंक्रीमेंट का क्या करूं।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स के एसआईपी का टॉप अप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
क्या? समझ में नहीं आया।
बेटा इतना क्या सोच रहा है? अपने म्यूचुअल फंड्स का एसआईपी टॉपअप करा ले। दिस इज द राइट टाइम।
अब समझा।
Mutual fund investments are subject to market risks. Read all scheme related documents carefully.
Last week, the Central Bureau of Investigation made the latest in a long series of attempts dating back to a historic case in 1989, the kidnapping of Rubiya Saeed, the older daughter of former Chief Minister and Union Home Minister Mufti Muhammad Saeed. The arrest isn't as important as the story itself. That moment transformed Kashmir, and it remains today a cautionary tale on the unintended consequences that peacemaking can have. I'll be discussing the story and its long, painful fallout in this episode of Security Code. Fireworks rose all over Srinagar, their warm light bouncing off the warren of canals that ran through the old city, emptying into the quiet expanse of the Dal Lake. Little gaggles of children standing on the fringes of the great procession which marched through Rajouri Kadal, with the 5 terrorists freed from prison that night by the government of India, stopped cars to ask for contributions to the carnival or at least a few sweets. Less than a week after that procession, the regime of the Romanian communist despot Nicolae Ceausescu disintegrated. To Kashmiri secessionists, it seemed the Indian state had also rotted and was ready to be kicked over. This week, the CBI made the latest of the arrests intended to cage the ogres and jinns set free on the night of 13 December 1989. Fugitive Shafkat Ahmad Shanglu, with a 10 lakh rupee bounty on his head, was the latest arrested. The CBI alleges he was among the men who facilitated the kidnapping. Except this story, like so many other stories that have been told since Rubiya Saeed's fateful kidnapping, doesn't make much sense. For a supposed fugitive, Shanglu lived in remarkably plain view, sharing his Facebook life with eminent scholars and journalists. He ran a small but successful business. Following his production before the Terrorist and Disruptive Activities Court, the CBI was very unusually denied his custody. Rubiya Saeed's kidnapping, followed by the murder of 4 Indian Air Force officers soon after, and the execution of Intelligence Bureau personnel, made the triumph of jihadism seem inevitable. And key Indian policymakers decided they had no option but to try and transmute the terrorists into Kashmir's future leaders. Local police officers were telling then Chief Minister Farooq Abdullah, who flew back from London to handle the kidnapping crisis, there would be no need to release jailed Jammu Kashmir Liberation Front terrorists. Kashmiri religious leaders, including the powerful Mirwais of the city, Muhammad Farooq, were exerting enormous pressure for the young doctor's release. Abdullah was told that most ordinary people were repulsed by the kidnapping. Taken from the minibus she was riding on to get home from work, Rubiya had first been held in Sopor. Then she had been taken to the home of businessman Muhammad Yaqub, a safe haven that the police knew about. Even as Abdullah pushed for the government to wait until the kidnappers cracked and released Rubiya, a small army of mediators interjected themselves into the conversation. Srinagar cardiologist Dr. Abdul Ahad Guru, Allahabad High Court Judge Motilal Bhatt, and the journalist Zafar Miraj were among them. 3 members of the Union Cabinet, Arun Nehru, I.K. Gujral, and Arif Muhammad Khan, also joined in. Faced with intense pressure from then Prime Minister V.P. Singh, the journalist and expert Manoj Joshi has written, Abdullah finally buckled to pressure for the release of Hamid Sheikh, who was recovering from a bullet wound in hospital. Along with him, Muhammad Altaf Butt, Sher Khan, Javed Ahmad Zargar, and Muhammad Kalwal were also released. Then, Abdullah drafted a 14-page letter to the Prime Minister explaining exactly why he thought this decision was terrible. The plain words of Kashmiri separatist leader Yasin Malik in an affidavit explain how he used this meltdown to position himself as a spokesperson for a movement, helped along by the intelligence agencies and security services. For India's intelligence establishment, the Rubiya kidnapping seemed to mark the coming of a political implosion. Terrorist coercion undermined India's ability to govern. Large numbers of National Conference workers had been assassinated, forcing the party rank and file to flee to Jammu and the leadership to go much further away. The Lok Sabha elections of 1989 saw Muhammad Shafi Butt elected from Srinagar uncontested because no other candidate would stand. Saifuddin Soz won Baramulla with just 1% of the electorate casting its vote. Following these failed elections, there was a string of bombings and shootings, often pitting mobs against the army and police. An affidavit filed by Yasin in a parallel terrorism funding case in the Delhi High Court makes clear he was rapidly recruited as a potential political asset. Following his arrest on the 6th of August 1990, he was brought to a border security force guest house in Mehroli on Delhi fringes. There, officials of the Border Security Force, the Intelligence Bureau, and the police tried repeatedly to pressure him to meet with the then Prime Minister Chandrasekhar. Facing serious cardiac surgery, he underwent an open heart surgery in 1992 with funds two government sources have told ThePrint that were originally earmarked for meeting the needs of indigent Kashmiri refugees in Delhi. Eminent civil society actors like Kuldeep Nair and Justice Rajinder Sachar met with Yasin multiple times, his affidavit states, as well as various high officials in government. 3 years of negotiation, which also involved diplomats from the United Kingdom and the United States, led Yasin to commit to non-violent democratic struggle, a decision that may have been influenced by the fact that his organization, the JKLF, had been decimated by the security forces as well as rival groups like the Hizbul Mujahideen. The JKLF leader was granted simultaneous bail in all 32 cases pending against him, and the prosecution simply disappeared. Yasin would go on to meet home ministers and prime ministers in India and generals and jihad commanders in Pakistan. From the memoirs of the former Research and Analysis Wing Chief Amarjit Singh Dullat, we know that several similar efforts were underway at the time. Arrested in 1989, People's League leader Shabir Shah was cultivated to see if he might be willing to contest the assembly elections scheduled for 1996. Long years of effort, though, ended in what Dullat has described as, quote, a hell of a letdown. Figures around Shah like Firdaus Sayyed, Bilal Lodi, Imran Rahi, and Ghulam Mohiuddin announced a peace initiative in 1996, but lacked leadership capabilities or a clear agenda of action. Another peace effort in 2002, spearheaded by the Hizbul Mujahideen dissident Abdul Majid Dar, ended in ferocious infighting. There were separate efforts to persuade the Hizbul Mujahideen chief Muhammad Yusuf Dar, who uses the pseudonym Sayyid Salahuddin, to return home. In 2000, the terrorist's son was granted medical college admission in Srinagar despite not having the grades, with the help of the good officers of the Intelligence Bureau. For the most part, Dullat writes, India's intelligence services sought to buy out the secessionists. This was true to pattern. The sacking of Farouk's government in 1984 was secured by, I quote, money which went in an intelligence bureau bag and was distributed by a big businessman who used to be a Congress member of parliament, Tirath Ram Amla. All these handouts, though, did not persuade the Hizbul Mujahideen chief to come home. The assassination of potential dialogue partners with the Indian government, like Abdul Ghani Lone, meanwhile, went on. Election after election, the killing continued. And the cases against Yassin kept hanging, just in case. Then, in 2016, the uprising that swept the Indian state out of large parts of southern Kashmir made one thing clear. The secessionists now spoke for no one, most certainly not the mobs of young people battling India on the street with stones. The reasons aren't too hard to find. India's efforts mistook handing over cash for a political engagement. There was no serious discussion on what the political participation of secessionists might look like and how this new force might coexist with the older, still formidable parties like the National Conference. Ever since 2019, the government has begun pushing prosecutions in old cases stalled for decades, signaling its seriousness about combating terrorism. The perpetrators of kidnappings ought indeed have been punished for their crimes, not dressed up and paraded as Kashmir's future political leadership. The challenge of rebuilding a political establishment battered by decades of war, though, remains. For a political class to reclaim its authority and legitimacy is no small thing. The real lesson from Yasin's cases is that no amount of cash wipes the taint of blood from killers who have never repented the means they used, nor the ends. I'm Praveen Swami, and I'm a contributing editor to ThePrint. Thank you for watching this episode of Security Code.